Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies with another video. This video is going to be about user ID in Palo Alto. Now, quick synopsis of what user ID is. It gives you the ability to create policies based on users or groups. Mainly it's going to be groups instead of subnets. Now, before we get into this, I want to have a brief conversation about why you should do this type of stuff, right? In today's day and age, you cannot, if you're still doing your policies based on subnet, you're doing it old school, right? It's been working, it always worked, but it's not good for today's landscape. And why is that? Because technically your policies will not be enforced if I'm not on the subnet you're doing the enforcing on. If I can move laterally to a different, let's say, prime example, servers, you might have a certain subnet that's allowed to talk to servers, and then every other subnet is not allowed to it. Well, if I get in using a different subnet, and then I can move laterally to the subnet that's allowed to talk to the server, I can now get around your policy of blocking unknown subnets in that rule to get to the server. Why you want to use identity-based policies is because that will follow you no matter where you are. And this is if you're at the edge, if you're using an internal firewall, kind of behind your server farm and stuff like that, or in front of your server farm, you really want to move into identity-based rules. Now on a Palo Alto, you're going to use AD, right? AD groups and stuff like that. On a FTD, you can use user-based stuff. That's your identity policy. Or if you're using TrustSec, you can use security group tags. Now, security group tags is a totally different scenario, and you need to have that TrustSec. You have to have really buttoned up before you just deploy that in your environment. I did a video about TrustSec. If I can find it, I'll throw it over here somewhere. But you really nowadays want to use identity-based rules because identity is what you can use to really solidify your firewall policies. Again, if you're still using subnets, that's cool and all, but start moving to identity if you have a firewall that can actually do identity-based rules, right? Whether it's user or something like security group tags. So I'm going to demonstrate this on a Palo first, and then my next video will be on a FTD. Now, FTD calls it realms. And then I think I did a video on SGTs as well. And if I see that, I'll put it over here as well. But I'll show you how to do at least the realms version on an FTD. Palo Alto today, though, we're going to just use user ID. So let's go ahead and sign up into this. Windows just popping up all over the place for some reason. So we're going to sign in here. And I'm just going to go through the basic concepts of setting this up. And of course, we're using TACX here to sign in. So let's go, and we are in here. And then I'll show you what it looks like on the back end as well, from a CLI standpoint. All right. So we may have to do one thing though, because right now we'll need to sign in because I don't see that on the back end here. First things first, we are going to, I'm going to log out of this and go to the HTML version because for some odd reason, VNC thing is kind of messing up, meaning it doesn't pop up all the time. So I'll just use the internal. So we'll go here and I'm going to sign out real quick. Log this over. Let's see why. Yep, here now this is messing up now. Of course it would. Anyway, we'll have to go back to native. So let's look at it from a Palo Alto perspective. So how you set this up is in devices. All right. So you need to go to devices and a couple things you need to do here. Number one, go to devices and you need to configure a server profile. Now I'm going to use LDAP for the server profile because that's where you're going to use the user base or user ID stuff. Now in FTDs, you configure a realm, which is basically doing the same thing, but you're going to do this on the FMC level. Again, if you're going to use something like FDM, it's a little different. So in my personal opinion, you're going to have FTDs, use an FMC for right now. but this is locally on box on the Palo Alto. So you need to go to your LDAP, configure your LDAP profile, you know, let's open this up. So I don't want to just show you that. So you configure your LDAP profile here and you point it to your LDAP server. When you do that, you select Active Directory. If it can find, if you're putting the right IP address in, the base DNN or the base DN or distinguished name will pop up automatically. If you don't put it in there, it won't happen. And then you need to fill out your bind DN, basically what account you're going to use, and then the password. Now I'm using SSL, so that's LDAP S because you see the port number is 636. Once you set that up, now you have to go to your user identity. All right, so you go to your user identity, and you fill out this information here. Make sure you put your DNS name in there, and then all that stuff is basically default. And then when you hit discover, it will discover your AD server. As you can see here, it says connected. Right. If you got a problem, if you don't put, if you have a problem, you'll see it here say it's not connected. Right. Once it's connected, the next thing you need to do is go to your group mapping settings. This is where you're going to determine what groups you want to map over. So you open this up and you go to, you pick your domain, your groups, stuff like that, and then you say groups include lists. So you go here, and this is where you will see if you did everything correctly, you will see, your 80 groups, right? And I just put 180 group in here. So no social media because I have a rule that just says, hey, if you want to go to social media and you're in the no social media group, it will deny all that. Now there may be one thing that I may have skipped over here. That is correct. Go to user ID, user mappings. That is correct. And then we got our group mapping. So everything is good to go from that standpoint. Now, once you got this group in here, you simply go over to your policies. Now, because I only got one group in here, I only have one policy in here. And as you can see, I am using this group here. That just says URL Calgary. Let me see if I can put anything else in here. Do, 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 do. All right. So I just have block any, but if I wanted to make an adjustment, you see where it says users here? I would just click this instead of any, which is real weird to have any in here. But I would say and no social media. All right. Now, once I do that, that rule is only going to apply if they're in this group, no social media. Doesn't matter about the subnet at this point. And as you can see by the rule, when this thing refreshes, I am now eliminating someone coming in from, I'm eliminating the subnet. So now it's no longer, you don't have to worry about the subnet at this point. It's, hey, are you in this group? And if you're in this group, I'm going to block you. So you can be whatever subnet you want. You can't escape this rule because it's based on your AD credentials instead of your subnet. Now, if we log in here, now I may have to log out and log back in for you to see this. And again, this is, let's see what we got here. This does this all the time. So we are going to clear out something real quick because the utility I'm using, some reason decided it just wants to break on me. So let's open this up. All right, so let's slide this over. There may be actually something wrong. This may be frozen. All right, so let's stop it. And we'll restart that there. But what it looks like on the Palo Alto backend is if you do this command show user IP user mapping all, when people sign in, you will see the IP to username mapping. Right now, it's nothing in there because I haven't signed in yet. But when I sign in, after a while, it will check the logs. Here we go again. It will check the logs on AD, and then it'll get that, hey, someone signed in, here's the IP address they got kind of thing. Like I said before, it looks totally different on whenever this wants to come up. I'll slide this out the way, but it looks totally different on FTDs because you have to go to the FMC and then you look at the user activity and see it there. But we can always make sure I did turn that back on. I'm waiting for it to come back on the back end here. So if I log out, log back in, you'll see eventually you'll see that user data on the back end in here. Right? Eventually you'll see that here when I sign in. So here I'm about to sign into this thing. Lab's being kind of slow, so go figure that one. Peg the lab and then this happens. But what I'm going to do eventually is when this comes back up, we'll sign in, and then after we sign in, the logs will get parsed from the Palo, and then you'll see it come up in the Palo eventually saying, hey, this user logged in, this is the IP address, here's the username, and then it'll do its query and stuff like that to hit that rule. Now, the other thing I did not send you or show you here is service routing. I'm gonna slide this over here. One of the critical pieces here, if you're not using the management interface for this, is your service routing needs to be set up correctly. So over here in service, you see this right here, service routing. All right. Now, service routing by default is going to use the management interface for all of this, right? But you can come in here and say for certain services, I'm going to use a different interface. So for instance, the LDAP, I'm using my inside interface of .15 and not the management interface. Because the management interface is technically my internal interface in my house, and the AD doesn't know anything about that. So I have to point it using the inside interface to do the bindings and stuff like that. So you got to make sure your service routing is correct, because if your service routing is not correct, this will not work. Right? It's the same thing with user ID too. If you want to do UID stuff, UID agent, and all that good stuff, you need to have that set up. On your zones, if you go to your zones, my inside zone, my LAN zone, you have to have to do this user ID enabled. User ID enabled will allow you to actually do something with the user ID information. Like if that's not enabled, you can't use UID, right? And then you can't make certain rules. So now let's slide this back over. Now remember when I told you the binding is going to happen? Here's the binding. I just signed in here. So I literally just signed into that machine. I also did some posturing there, so posture compliance. So this is I'm mixing and matching different technologies. I have ISO on the back end. I'm doing posturing. I did hide the AnyConnect or secure client. I'll make a video. If you want to see a video on how to hide that, put it in the comments and I'll make a video on that. So this is just the compliance module. By default, you have to have you'll have the secure client as well at top. But if you want to hide it, there's a certain way you got a certain XML you have to put in to hide it, so you only see the posture module. So now that I'm signed in, we can just get that out the way, and now you can see that mapping came through of that machine is 192.168.14 8.14. And if let's actually show that there. That just disappeared on me. All right. So if we go, let's just view it real quick just to make sure it correlates with everything I just showed you. So 192.168 8.14 is the same as the other one that I just showed you guys. Let me go do this. There we go. So it matches. So this is why you do identity-based policies, because I don't really care that it's 192.168 8.14. I just care about the user, right? But you need that user to IP mapping to make the rule work. It's just like with SGTs. You need that SGT to IP mapping to actually do some type of enforcement on it. If you don't have the source and the IP mapping, none of this is going to work, right? But again, this defeats the whole, hey, I hop over to a different subnet and now that rule no longer works. The rule is pretty much based on your ID or your user ID. So if you look at the policy here, it is not based on subnets, it's based on your user credentials and your group mapping. So you can't escape that, right? Somebody, your account gets compromised. Okay, well, my rules are based on on certain accounts. So as long as I have rules that dictate what certain groups can do, I don't care what subnet you're on, right? It's just like SGTs. But that is user ID in Palo Alto. Again, the next video I'm going to create is going to be the same thing, but on the FTD side, right? And I'm going to show you what realms are and stuff like that. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. Repost it on your socials, whatever you're doing. The more people come in, the more I get to spread this knowledge. So yeah, definitely hit that subscribe button. This is Don from Palo Alto Technologies again. Hope you had a nice day. Hope you liked this video. Thank you and have a nice day.